this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter, and this is Revolution Radio, Studio B. Our guest today is James Keenan, and he's an author, lecturer, and field investigator. He has written 5 fictional novels that have science fiction, supernatural, or paranormal components to them. James began his writing career after spending more than 25 years in law enforcement and private investigations. His most recent book, The UFO and an Alien, is an attempt to bring younger generations into ufology by introducing them to the main ideas and components of the subject matter, all while telling an excellent story that is directed towards elementary school-age children. He has a degree in Interdisciplinary Studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara. His main curriculum was anthropology and archaeology with a focus on Mesoamerican cultures. The majority of his field work while at school were in the areas where the Maya culture flourished. During the last 10 years, James noticed that he considered the lack of archaeological investigation into the reason past cultures suddenly disappeared. Because of this, he began to investigate the issue himself, and in the course of doing so, he noticed that evidence existed within many cultures that pointed towards the same catastrophic events taking place on a worldwide level. So I have a full bio and pictures on the website. Also, his book, The UFO and an Alien, latest book, I guess. He has 5 books. And so we're going to be talking to James. James will enjoy talking to Dr. Lessin, who has a PhD in anthropology. So you guys have a lot to talk about, too. So before I bring on James, I want to do a little sound check and bring in my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, also known as Sweetheart. Are you there?
I am. I don't know if my mic is working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay, well, I'm really interested, James, in what your rap is about. I am a student of Zacharias, so is Janet and Sitchin's. And, we have this talk that Ningishita Toth brought over some of Cain's descendants to Tiwanaku and also to Teotihuacan very early, and he was mining gold there. He educated the Maya. He educated some youths, and then he even made them skyfaring, and then he left them in charge. And recently, LiDAR has shown millions of people on great, huge sites that haven't even been explored yet. And I just think the Mayan area is wide open. In terms of what's happening in the United States right now is that all these wonderful people speaking Mayan languages, bringing whatever's left of their ancient culture, are there at our border. And this is our opportunity to get some golden, wonderful people if we just let them in. That's what I think.
Oh, and I wanted to also say thank you bringing this educational program to children, because when we're at these conferences, it's all old folks, so we need the kids to come in. We need the
Absolutely.
Yeah. So welcome to our show, James.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
So we want to begin with you telling us about yourself. So you were in law enforcement. Did you encounter any UFOs or extraterrestrials? There's usually something that triggers someone to go into this subject, and it seems you have two different approaches: your studies at the university, and then I guess something else was the catalyst for you to get into this research. So go ahead and tell us about your life and anything that you've encountered in the paranormal ufology realm. And then we'll start asking questions about 15 or 20 minutes into your talk.
Sure, absolutely.
Take it away, please.
Sure. I think everything started at a pretty young age with me. I had a near-death experience when I was about 18 or 19 months old. I had drowned and was not pulled out of the water for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I obviously... They had said that, told my parents I was going to be a vegetable, and I proved them wrong in that sense.
Wow. Did you have any out-of-body or near-death experiences when you were dead or drowning?
And that's the interesting thing, is even though it happened at 18, I think it was 18 or 19 months, I remember absolutely everything after I came back. And my memory is as good as an adult's memory at that age, which a lot of people find interesting, that I'm able to remember day to day since that tragedy took place. And I had quite a bit of paranormal activity and events in my life. Started about the age of 4. As a matter of fact, my first fictional book, Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, I had originally, it was going to be an autobiography, and being in law enforcement, and I was a special investigator in the insurance industry and an investigator in loss prevention. I didn't think it was going to go too well if I wrote something like that, especially when I was in the path of law enforcement. So I figured that I would write fictional novels and kind of, put in, I'd say probably about 40 or 50% of the book, the main character that's in there. It's my stories, my life. I've obviously added a lot of fiction as well and adjusted the storylines. And then also in that book, like you had said, I'm very interested in anthropology and archaeology. That started probably in college when I was taking those courses, and you would listen to the professors speak, and it seemed very far-fetched, a lot of what they were discussing, and the realities of things with ancient cultures and civilizations. It just didn't seem to be completely correct to me. So I introduce in Dark Shadows and Catastrophe a lot of my belief system as well into that fiction. And, you know, as you had said, in my course of being in law enforcement, I never saw any unidentified flying objects, but there were several paranormal events which were extremely interesting that took place, and incorporated those into my books as well. And a few years ago, I was in special investigations in the insurance industry, and the company I worked for had gone through a lot of, they'd been purchased several times, and they ended up doing away with the department and vending it out to a third party. So instead of doing something that I really wasn't interested in, I figured, you know what, it's about time that I start writing, start discussing and introducing articles and books and lectures about, you know, about the truth in our past, about a lot of ancient cultures and civilizations that existed differently than what we've been told, about a lot of past catastrophes that have taken place where there's a lot of proof in the rock art, there's a lot of proof in, you know, the buildings and the stelae, so many different things that are overlooked or misinterpreted. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm hoping to, you know, pass on that information. The book that I wrote recently, The UFO and an Alien, just like you had said, I go to the conferences and you look around, and I tend to be one of the younger people there, and I'm in my late 40s. Mm-hmm. And I figured, you know, I don't want us to lose this push that we've made recently in the last few years, and a lot of great people have passed away in the last year or two. And
yeah, we lost Stan Freeman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to. There was a lack of information to the children, to the kids specifically. You know, I figure if you start them early in the elementary school age level, you start introducing them to what this terminology and vocabulary that we use are, and not just what they see on TV, but you know, some things that, you know, I would consider factual. I know a lot of people would disagree, but there's a lot of different things out there that happen in the paranormal and in, you know, up in space, either cosmology or astronomy. And I figured that starting a series of books and introducing UFOlogy, disclosure, paranormal events would just be a great thing to hopefully get them interested and get them coming to meetings, get them coming to conferences, get them going to the library when these speakers go. You know, same thing, you look around and everybody's a lot older. So hopefully that's where I'm going with this book. I hope, you know, it seems to be doing very well, and I'm hoping that there are more of these books to come in the future that are going to get them involved with us.
Yeah, that's excellent. I want to unpack things. I want to get back to your 18-month-old drowning. Can you tell us what happened more specifically? Where did you go when you were out of body or dead or whatever you want to call it? And yeah, tell us more details about your drowning.
Yeah, sure. When I drowned, it was interesting. It was very calming. It was almost initially going to sleep. I can remember, you know, being under the water, and then falling asleep, and then waking up. But what was interesting was when I woke, I obviously was no longer here. I realized I no longer was physically, I guess you would say, on this planet. had this ability or this feeling or this process that everything was available to me. There was no use of visual perception. I know a lot of people say, they see a light or they see people. It wasn't like that for me. It was being connected. There was this sense or this feeling of all types of presence around me, a connection with absolutely everything, an ability to be anywhere but not to see it, but to feel it and be a part of it. There was no sense of, light, no sense of visual perception, but there was a lot of other new perceptions that are very difficult to explain. I wouldn't know how to explain it. It was just I guess I could say a connectivity to everything.
Great.
James,
let us.
Go ahead. If I could ask a question, Janet, this is really interesting. In existentialism, we assume that there's intentionality in whatever our outcomes are. That is, if you had chosen this experience for yourself, what did you get out of it? And you're telling us that. But then there's another very question for me as a psychologist, which is, who is your caretaker and what was their intentionality in letting you drown?
What happened? It was at a party, and one of the other kids there opened up the door. And apparently I went out into the backyard where this pool was located and fell in. And they were looking for me, and it took time to locate where I was at.
Okay, so your parents didn't watch you properly. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it was that. I think there was just a whole lot going on at the time.
Okay. Please don't disregard what I said. I'm just, I'm interested in certain kind of things. Thanks.
Sure.
So, and then what was the other question you asked, Sasha? You said about
the question is your intentionality. If you designed this experience for you, you have this spiritual sense from the time you're a baby. Well, that's a tremendous leg up on life.
I guess you could look at it that way. For me, Dr. Lessin, I didn't really start to really think about it or ponder about what had happened until maybe about 15 years ago. Life was, it happened so quickly, and as a child, you really don't recognize, everything that you've done in your life in such a short time, or that it's the potential for,
Well, you already told us that you had a startling, vivid memory of details that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You were up-leveled, man.
I guess you could put it that way.
Did you encounter any other people or beings or animals or in this out-of-body, otherworldly state?
Well, that was the interesting thing, was it almost seemed like everything was connected, and I can't quite explain it because I don't know how. That there was like this ability to feel and sense everything all together, like we were all one or connected as the same. And
right, yeah.
I guess the perceptions or the senses that we have here now in our physical body, they weren't really necessary. It was other things, and it's difficult to explain what those were.
I had a near-death experience when I was 4, and it was unintentional. It was an accident. it was not like yours. There was some violence, and I got hurt, and so I was out of body. Now I went into that oneness, but I had a sense of a review or a decision to come back. I could have stayed there. Did you have any kind of choice, or you were just found yourself back again? What happened when you came back? So you're in this space, and you just feel connected to everybody. So what's going on? They finally found you. You said you were under like 10 minutes or something?
Yeah, correct.
Did you get? Yeah. Tell us what happened.
Sure. I was pulled out of the pool and administered CPR, and I guess brought back. And it was from wherever I was to that part, it was just, I don't know, kind of being like just this feeling of being pulled back and then suddenly waking up, and then, being in the back of the ambulance. But I didn't have any control of it, or at least I don't believe I did.
Mm-hmm.
Or have any type of decision of staying or coming back. I was somewhere else, and then I was back here. And all I can say is it was fine with me where I was. It was very peaceful. It seemed normal. The transition was fine. And then coming back was fine, as well, because I was back with family, and that was just as good.
Now, you said something about you started having paranormal events other than that, or that happened, around 4 or something? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
When did your paranormal, and what was going on? What types of things happened?
Sure. So, like I said, I was going to initially make an autobiography, and I called my first book Dark Shadows and Catastrophe. When I was 4, we lived in La Habra, California, and I had quite a bit of, the paranormal with shadow figure, a very specific shadow figure. And at sometimes it became physical.
What did it look like? What do you mean by a shadow figure? I mean,
sure.
It looks like a shadow, but would it come in your bedroom? Did you see it going to school? What was going on?
Sure. So, it was most of the time, and it was almost always in the house that we lived in. This thing was probably 4 or 5 feet. It's interesting. It had, and I always know this is kind of weird. It had like a hunter's cap on it, and I could never see a face, but I could clearly make out that it was a human form or a human shape. Sometimes it had legs, sometimes it didn't. The face was where the face should have been. You could kind of see like an outline of a face, but never quite. It was very, wavy or transitional, almost like in between physically being there and not being there, I guess would probably be the best way to describe it.
What did it communicate to you?
So it never spoke. It was just very negative all the time, including physical contact on occasion. And
what do you mean? What did it hit you or something like that? What do you mean?
Yeah, well, there were times like it would pull the covers over me to the point where I could barely move or breathe.
Wow.
There were times where it threw things at me, knocked me to the floor, and
wow.
What's even worse is at some point it started to interact with my parents and became physical with my father at one time.
What did it do?
Did you see that? Did you witness that?
Well, what happened was, I guess at some point it went from my room into their room, and I started hearing screaming, and it was physically, throwing my father up and down on the bed. And what they said they saw was like this huge form or mass, almost like a blurry bear. But when I looked at it, I saw something completely different. It's what I saw.
Wow.
Did you have any siblings? Did it bother your siblings?
You know, I have one sibling, but she had not been born yet. And then when she was born, the activity kind of died off. It was very rare after that point.
So how old were you when it was attacking you?
4 years old.
4. And was it there for years or just that year when you were 4?
We didn't live there that long, so it wasn't, I'd say maybe a year and a half. But it wasn't.
So you're associating it with a place. You're associating with this particular house. Is that right?
Well, it actually showed up a few other times, but it was very rare. And the last time it ever did anything where I saw it was when I was 15, and it was in a completely different.
So that's a long time.
Yeah. But, I mean, there was huge bouts or periods of time where nothing ever happened. I mean, years. And then just when I was 15, it showed up like 2 or 3 more times, and then that was it. And this was in a different house, a different state.
Okay, so when you're 15, you already got a strong body, and now you're confronting this guy with a lot more power. How did it go when you're 15 and you're confronting this force?
Well, and that was the whole thing is, you know what, I think the last time that I saw it and it tried doing anything, I say, you know, with the character in the book, I got sick and tired of it and I got angry and it realized that I was no longer afraid and I wasn't going to give it that. And that was it.
Wow.
So looking back at it, and did your parents have any more encounters with it?
No, it was the one time only. Yeah, just that one time.
But that was pretty violent. It was. What did your dad say or think, or did you talk? Did you talk to him about the episode? That
he won't talk about it. I have to speak to my mother about it.
Okay, what does she say about it? She witnessed it. She wasn't touched, or was she touched as well?
No, she was trying to stop it from happening. But that's how I know what they saw. She said she saw this very large, almost like a bear-looking figure, very blurry, dark. That was all they saw. They didn't see what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm. And were they asleep? Were they?
Yeah. So
what happened when your father was attacked?
No, they were asleep in bed when it took place.
And did they turn the lights on when it woke them up, or how did they see it?
No, I don't believe they turned the lights on. They could see the large, I guess, dark object or presence that was on top of my father.
So I think what you're saying.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that the motive of this, what you're saying, that you picked up from your observation, and what is that the motive of this thing was to scare you. That its intention was to frighten you. Is that what you got?
You know what? That's what I feel. It's the only thing that I could. I guess I could come to a conclusion to that the more it caused that fear and that scare is the reason why it constantly came to me. I don't know what other reason there would have been. I don't know.
The beautiful side of that is that after that, when you stood up in your rage and your self regard, you became a man at that point, and you were able to carry on the rest of your life. It seems really powerful to me.
Oh, that's surely what it seems like.
My sister and brother both had a similar encounter. My brother, this is at the family home where we were all raised. He got choked. It actually was choking him around his neck, and he woke up being choked. So you said it pulled the covers up and tried to. Did it pull it over her head, or what happened?
It did. Sure. So it pulled the covers so tight, completely over me that I could barely breathe. From both sides, from all over the bed, and it just was pulling down and down on it, and just kind of crushing me to the mattress.
So that's kind of violent. That they could have killed you, right? How did you get out of that? Did you kick back or? No,
I was so fearful. I couldn't even move. It just eventually let go.
It just let go. Yeah. Now my brother kicked at it, and he felt something. He felt that his foot hit something, and he kicked it off of him. So, but he was more like an adolescent when he had that encounter, a little bit older than you. My sister was a full-on adult, and she said the Lord's Prayer, and it went away. So this is interesting. I wonder how many people out there have had encounters with paranormal entities or whatever they are that tried to harm. I mean, that was not a nice thing for you or your father. And it left your mother alone.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Was anything going on in your life when that happened? And did they move because of that? Do you think they moved because of that?
No, we were still there for a while after that, and I really don't know of anything that was taking place that was, out of the ordinary or different than, day to day.
Wow. Okay, so they stayed. I would have moved, but they stayed. What was the next thing that happened that was odd, paranormal, or out of the ordinary? Because you had some paranormal things.
When I was a police officer, when I was pretty young in the early 90s, I had a pretty interesting experience on duty. We had gone to a domestic violence call, and it was a normal address location. We went there quite a bit, and I believe it was my rookie year. And we'd been to that house several times on, domestic violence calls. And we went into this house, and we met with the husband and the wife, and I believe they had 3 children. And we had them all sit down in the living room, and we were telling the wife and the husband, my partner was, he was telling me, that he's sick of having to come here. What we're going to do is we're just going to end up arresting both of you and taking you, to county, put the kids into Child Protective Services if we have to come back. And we had told the father when we started this conversation that we wanted everybody in the living room. So he had all the kids come down, and they were sitting there. Well, as we were talking to them, we heard something upstairs. It was a 2-story house, and it seemed like people running around or walking, and how the boards creak. And then then we heard several curse words, and my partner stopped, and he told the guy, he goes, I told you I want everybody down here now. And the husband told my partner, he goes, everybody is down here. And my partner turned to me, he goes, go up and get whoever is upstairs and bring them down. And the father says, everybody is here. He goes, you're just not going to like what you see. We've just been having issues. And I was like, well, what issues? And he goes, I don't know how to explain it. And I turned around and I started walking towards the staircase. And as I did, I started hearing a lot of people yelling and cursing. and they were, I mean, upset. I pulled out my flashlight because the light, it was nighttime, the light was off on the stairways to go up, and shined my light up there, and I couldn't see anybody moving, and I called up a few times to come down, and nothing. And I kept being told, F you, screw you, forget, just all kinds of things. So I started walking up the stairs, and they had an older house. And do you remember how they used to have that fake wood paneling?
Yes.
On the walls and in the hallways. Well, as I was walking, I got up to the top of the staircase, and I start walking down this hallway, and it has these wood panels, and I swear that I see this movement in the walls. And I shine my flashlight on the panels, and I see hundreds of these faces. And I thought at first, I was like, man, it's just the wood, because a lot of times you seem to see like, faces and objects in those in the wood, in the design. But these were moving. They were moving.
God.
They were actual faces. And they were yelling and cursing at us for being there in the house. And I quickly turned around and went halfway back down the staircase until I could see my partner and everybody. And I told him, I said, you need to get up here because I don't know how to explain it. And the father goes, I told you. He goes, I don't know how to explain what's happening. And I told my partner, I said, you got to come up here now. And the cussing got super loud. I mean, it sounded like we were in a room with hundreds of people, and he started walking up the staircase, and he was like, well, what's going up? Who's up there? And the moment he got up there and I got up there, everything stopped. And it was just back to the wood panels. There was nothing else. And it was just extremely, it was creepy. And it was just an interesting experience that I guess there was.
How do you think those people managed to live there? I couldn't have stayed there.
Did they have another? Did you ever have to go back there again after that?
You know what? Thank goodness I never had to go back there after that. But we didn't get a call back to that location again, and I went through the books for the other shifts, and I didn't see any other calls to that location after we were there. And we had kind of talked to them, and I don't know if they moved at that point or what happened, if they worked it out, and that was just the last time.
Well, I'm wondering if the entities that were there were affecting the couple. I mean, with such violence coming from those beings, those ghosts or whatever, maybe that was affecting them. Did you ever have any thoughts about that or any insights about what was going on?
Have you ever walked into a place and you just felt just this heaviness of, just very bad vibes? That was how it was at this house. I guess there was just so much fighting and anger going on between the family. You could almost feel it when you walked in.
Wow. Well, I grew up in a haunted house, so this is freaking me out. But I never had that type of thing with the cursing. I just had, people standing at the foot of my bed. But, yeah. Okay, but what was the next thing? So you're a young rookie, and we've interviewed some people like that were in the FBI and had a special, like a fringe investigative division. Did your police department have anybody that could investigate things like that?
No.
The FBI brought down the guy that was sending all those bombs to people in the mail, and they'd open it up, and all this stuff would fly out, and the FBI couldn't get him by regular kinds of methods. So they got all the psychic guys in the FBI got together and they pinpointed it at this guy somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, no, they didn't have anything like that, and we definitely didn't put that in our report. We kept that to ourselves.
Okay, so that's probably what happened with other people. If anybody else encountered it, you don't put that in the report. You want to keep your job.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, what was your next paranormal event in your life? So you kind of got activated when you were 18 months old, and things started happening with 4. So not much happened between 4, and how old were you when you were a rookie in the police force?
I believe that happened when I was in my very early 20s.
And then you had the incident when you were, 14 or 15, right?
15, correct.
You told him 15, okay. So what else happened?
So I had, that was when I was in Texas. When I moved back to California, I was actually in loss prevention for a very large retailer. And in the late it was in the very early 2000s. I was working at loss prevention as a manager at this one store, and it was a old building that the mall that was connected to it had actually been built around this building. So it was a freestanding building originally that was built in the very early 60s. And early in the 2000s, they had decided to make a men's and women's store separate. So they started knocking down the connector walls that had been built when the mall started being put up. And they found that a room, it was a bomb shelter room, had accidentally or had purposely, who knows, been built over and forgotten. And when they started doing the construction, they opened up this room. And there were articles in there, and there was like canned goods and all kinds of neat stuff. They actually did a story on it in the local paper about all the papers. They found the old newspapers showing, when it was originally being built. And it was really neat. Except, however, after that room was open, some interesting things started happening. One day I was closing by myself, and I was watching the cameras, the closed circuit television cameras in the back room of the security office, and I noticed what looked like somebody up on the top floor. And the top floor is not accessible to the public, and it was already closing, and there's not supposed to be anybody up there. And the upstairs at that time didn't have cameras itself. It was the camera at the elevator. And it looked like somebody had come out of the elevator and went up to that 4th floor, which was where they stored all the, the extra shelving and the mannequins, and where they did all the designing and merchandising. So I went upstairs, and I got out of the 4th floor elevator, and I'm looking around, and I saw this shadow figure go walking down the hall. No. And I started yelling at it because I thought it was either an employee or somebody that accidentally somehow got to the 4th floor, even though you needed a key to get up there. And I was yelling at it, and it wouldn't listen to me. It kept walking. So I ran down to stop it. I was going to tell he or she that they're trespassing, and they need to leave. The store's closed. And I get right to the figure, and it just shoots down the hall, like flies down the hall, and is gone. And I'm just kind of standing there, and I'm like, oh man, this crap's happening again. And wow. So I turn around and quickly, go back down to the elevator and go back downstairs, and I'm watching on the cameras, and I don't see anything happen. So every now and then, even during the middle of the afternoon, people started seeing things up on the 4th floor, a shadow figure walking around. And one night, maybe maybe a month later, I walk into the back office where the cameras are because I was going to start watching these individuals that came into the store. It looked like they were going to start shoplifting. And the moment I walk into the back of the camera room, this shadow figure is sitting in the chair where I was about to sit and just shoots straight up into the ceiling and is gone. So needless to say, I didn't start watching those people in the camera room. I went out on the floor and did it. So.
Wow. It sounds like a science fiction movie, but you made it part of your book. Wow.
Yeah, I've incorporated that into my fourth book. It's called Shoplifting in a Paranormal Zone, based it upon that, and I also included a lot of the shoplifting stops that took place. So a lot of that book also has a lot of real lifetime experiences in it.
Sasha, do you have any questions?
Yeah, not about that. That's all very fascinating, though. But I guess I'm still cogitating about why it is that about the Mexicans and Central Americans denied the Olmecs so long, and it was what it's been ascribed to is that the people of Spanish descent didn't want to recognize that Yucatan had been ruled by a class of people from Africa. And I don't know whether what Janet's plans are, but I hope you get to talk about the Maya, because I'm really interested in that.
I thought we'd cover the anthropology and archaeology stuff in the second hour. I thought we'd just wrap up all the paranormal. So we will. That's a previews of the second hour. I wanted to go into the paranormal and how you got into this latest book about the ufology, UFO and alien for children. So tell us a little bit more about that, perhaps.
Sure.
What other paranormal things were incorporated in your other books? And then, go ahead.
So do you want me to talk about the UFO and an alien?
Well, unless you're complete. Are you complete with all the paranormal incidents? Because they're fascinating. Do you have any more paranormal incidents that you want to convey to us?
No, that's pretty much everything. I'm sure there's, just small tidbits here and there, but at this moment I don't quite remember everything, all the small details.
And so the 15-year-old event, and you were living where? And then let's just go over that one more time. Where were you living when you had that final? Was that a violent one too? He was trying to harm you.
We had moved to Texas. Yeah, it was in Texas when that last, I guess, event took place with the shadow figure. And well,
do you think it was the same one? The one that you think it followed you from when you were 4?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the same figure. I mean, it looked exactly the same. It never changed.
Did it look like the one in the store, or was that a different figure?
No. That was a different figure. That looked. I thought it was an employee or a customer. Yeah.
So it looked like a human male.
Absolutely. Yeah. It could have.
And it wasn't. It could have been an employee, and it wasn't a shadow figure. It was more human looking. No, it was when I was up on the 4th floor. It's dark up there because it's not accessible to the public. It's where they do a lot of the storage. They store the mannequins, and they store the shelving, the extra shelves, and all that for the main part of the store. So at that time, it was closing at night. There really isn't a lot of light up there, so it was pretty dark. So when I was looking down the hall, from the elevator to the middle of the hall, it seemed like it was a person from that far away. Wow.
But as I approached it, then I realized when, there's something different, especially when well, obviously when it took off flying down the hallway, but, yeah, it wasn't, a solid, it wasn't solid.
And it was able to fly. It was able to float. Now, this one you saw when you were 15, what was it, standing, sitting? Where was it in proximity to you?
No, it had actually, I was sleeping in my waterbed, and it made the waterbed move so violently that it threw me out on the floor, onto the floor of my room.
Oh, my God.
And I guess you could say that was the first time that I really, I guess, fought back, and I was just sick and tired of it, and then it went away, and that was it.
When you fought that, you felt you were hitting it, or you felt did you hit it? Is that what you said? How did you fight back?
No, I think it was more the fact that I wasn't fearful. It wasn't a physical. It was more the fact that I started talking back to it, yelling at it, and I just had a change of attitude completely.
Yeah, I've had that happen. You get mad, and then they run away. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes before we're at the top of the hour, so let's go briefly on to, so you're writing a book about the UFO and an alien. How do you know about the aliens?
Well, you know, a lot of, when you go to the paranormal, or there's really not. I always believe that in UFOlogy, there's almost a crossover between the paranormal and UFOs, or dimensions, interdimensionality. In some way, shape, or form, they all seem to be connected. And so, you know, I would go to a conference here in Arizona or in California, and that topic interests me because in anthropology and archaeology and a lot of the rock art or in the stelae, there's a lot of things that can be interpreted different than what the mainline anthropologists and archaeologists say something is. And I'm open to things being different than what they say they are. And so I always believe that there's the possibility that, you know, humans here on this planet have had help in becoming human, and that a long time ago there was visitation or ancient astronauts. And when I would go to the conferences, you would look around, and like I said, everybody was a lot older, and you rarely would see kids or teenagers there. And I got to thinking, you know, what happens if the next generations don't pick up where, you know, the investigations and the research are currently? What's going to happen? And a lot of what you see on mainstream television is just not right or not true. It's obviously, you know, to sell. And I decided that I wanted to introduce the kids to something that would, you know, not just teach them the morals and values and differences between equality and equity, but introduce them to UFOlogy, to disclosure, to this terminology and the vocabulary, to the technology, to military involvement, but at a level for elementary children. And so I wrote the book as this is really great story.
What are some of your chapters? What are some of your chapters in the book?
Sure. So some of the chapters are, you know, just the four friends, kind of showing that they're all different, and that those differences to them didn't mean anything, but then into next chapter when they meet what they do is they're in Colorado next to Peterson Air Force Base, and they come across these petroglyphs, and the petroglyphs look to show what could actually be, an ancient astronaut or a different entity. And there's technology in the petroglyphs that look futuristic or more equipped than what we currently have. And as they venture more, they're not supposed to be hiking out in the mountains. They do it without their parents knowing. They told them they were going to the park. They run into a UFO, and they realize that apparently this area has been a hot spot. And
all right, that's where we have to take a break. We'll be back in 5 minutes, so thank you for listening. We'll be back in 5.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You are live.
Aloha and welcome back to Sacred 8 Tips on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Care Lessin. My co-host is Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. My wonderful producer is Thomas Becker, also known as a bad painter, and we are here on Revolution Radio, Studio B, and our guest is James Keenan, author. And we will be talking to him more this second hour. But first, I want to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on revolution.radio and do make your donation. We seriously need donations. Hawk is still in the hospital, and we hope he'll be back out soon. And we don't really know how much money we've earned or how much we need. So please, please, please donate. And we really appreciate your donations. So thank you very much. Did you want to say anything, Ahmad?
Just that Hawk's been listening, and he's very happy with the job everybody's been doing, and he appreciates it.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, other hosts. Thank you, producers. We really appreciate you. Okay, back to you. So what we're going to do the second half, we're going to finish about the book. The latest book about the alien, the UFO and an alien. And then we're going to go into the anthropology part. We're going to first listen to James and his theories and what he learned. But do you have anything to say before we go back and bring James back on? Sasha, do you have anything you want to say?
When the break was going to begin, we started talking about the overlap between paranormal experiences and UFO type experiences, and if you have a fractal kind of a view of things, that everything in the universe has a resonance within us, and everything that we are is a resonant in everything, in every not thing in the universe, so to speak. Then you have a basis for saying, well, of course there's resonations. There'll be something in your childhood, in this moment, in your past lives, in the stories you like, in the archetypes you're attracted to. that are all true of you, and you can consider them as dimensions or levels of consciousness, but it's all always present. I find this a useful way, at least, to look at things. And what we anthropologists, I'm a professional anthropologist, and revisionist anthropology do, the ethnographic part is we do not say that our people are stupid and make up silly shit. What we say is that they are talking about their experience in the metaphors that are available to them, and so that we start by when people say, a whale swallowed Jonah, we might think about, and they don't know about submarines, maybe he got in a sub, that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm just really, I think it's a great discussion. The different levels are really part of the same thing, and you're the integrator. James, it's back to you.
Great, thank you. So, with the UFO and an alien, what I really wanted to do was obviously introduce the kids, to the technology, the military involvement, and as the book evolves, these children initially are afraid of the alien because of how different he is, but then they realize that the four of them are all different as well. Different race, different religions, and during the course of that, they have to come to terms and accept that they're all living creatures, including the alien that's with them. And so the stories, it was set out to go down two different paths. I wanted to really have kids understand the difference between equality and equity, because so few people in this day and age seem to even understand that. And what a great way to do that, and at the same time hopefully bring in new blood into the UFO community, into the paranormal community, into the ancient catastrophes and lost civilizations and mega structure buildings of the past. And this is the first book. It's a part one of part two.
Wait, James, what do these two terms mean in terms of our listening audience? The difference between justice and equality, or tell us the distinction you're trying to teach.
Sure, absolutely. I always like to tell people you can think of it as three people of three different heights trying to look over a fence to watch a baseball game. And the first guy is able to see over the fence already. The second guy can barely not see over the fence. And the third guy is so short that he absolutely can't see over the fence to see the baseball game. So equality, you would hand each one of them the same box, a 2-foot tall box or a foot tall box. And they've all equally received that box. And each one of them can stand on it. And the first guy can really see well now. The second guy, who originally couldn't see over the fence, can now see the game. But the third guy still can't see over. So even though they were equally received a box, there's still no equity until the taller individual on the left hands his box to the shortest individual on the right. And now that person has two boxes. And he is able to see as well as the other two people the baseball game.
Wow.
So we've gone from equality to equity in life.
Wow, that's beautiful. Oh, I absolutely love it. That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that Marianne Williamson was talking about reparations. And all the straight people think she's crazy, but it isn't. It's helping people have a fair chance. I love your analogy. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to cover this also. I see that you have a presentation called Ancient Anomalies, pointing toward past worldwide catastrophic events. So that probably is part of your research into anthropology and archaeology. So you want to start with your information you've gathered in your research.
Sure.
The Maya culture and all the other stuff you've done in that arena. Go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. So when you look at the archaeological record, when I was in college and I went through my anthropology and archaeology classes, you were told one thing about the past, and what you had to realize was a lot of this information and a lot of what we were being taught originated in the late 18th century, early 19th century. And when they started creating these theories about past cultures or past civilizations, a lot of technology wasn't known to them. And there was no real revolution in this technology until the Industrial Revolution. And if you look at the past, I mean, flying objects that man are able to get into didn't really take place until the early 1900s, or so we think. So you can clearly see that there is something else going on when you look at ancient artifacts, buildings, when you look at monumental structures, when you listen to these oral traditions that were eventually put into writing, whether it was on rock or paper or other, and you look at the religious texts and other forms of recording data, I realize that we need to quit looking at it in an 18th or 19th century perspective. And we really need to start looking at it in a perspective of late 20th, 21st century, where we recognize new technology because we have the beginning of that technology. And as I did this, especially in the rock art, in petroglyphs and pictographs, I started realizing that something was going on other than what we were being told from mainstream archaeologists. But if I even attempted to discuss it or ask questions outside of that box, they cut you off, they shut you down. And I got frustrated. I got my degree, and I wanted to go in a different direction than just stick to regurgitating what my professor taught me, that he learned from his professor, that he learned from his professor, down the line. It was the same crap. And I realized that it couldn't all be the way they were telling it. So I started looking into alternative archaeology. I started reading, and, you come across individuals like Eric von Daniken, or Graham Hancock, people of that nature, where they may not have had any anthropology or archaeology through the university, but their theories or their take on past ancient history seemed to be more of my belief. And I realized that my belief system was never going to be able to be discussed with my professors. So I went off into a different path. I went into investigations, into law enforcement, into private investigations, whether it was in insurance or retail or as just a private investigator. And then, like I said, when I finally had this forced opportunity, when my entire department was laid off, I was like, you know what, now is a better time than never. If I wait until I'm a lot older or retired, I'm not going to be able to travel. I'm going to lose a lot of the knowledge that I have. I'm going to forget certain perspectives of anthropology or certain perspectives of how to conduct, a field investigation and things of that. So I was like, I'm gonna write the books. I'm gonna do it fictionally because I wasn't quite sure where I was gonna go with this or if it was gonna work out. So just in case, I'd better not do nonfiction. I better stick to fiction and put my thought processes into it. And what I did was I initially started with what I knew best, which was Mesoamerican culture, which is Central American cultures, which include, most people know the Maya, but Maya's not everything. There was many, many other cultures in Mexico, or what's now Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, El Salvador. You have these Olmec that we don't even know who they called themselves. Olmec is an Aztec word that means rubber people. And then when you look into the archaeological record or the anthropological record through oral tradition, there's even a proto-Olmec. There's a group of people that they don't have features of what we would consider Hispanic or Mesoamerican. These features are from all over the world, including Africa, which is intense. You look to seem to see or show that there was a seafaring culture going on, or maybe there was more. Maybe there was a prior land masses that are below water now where these people originated. And maybe it's backwards. Maybe they didn't come over the Bering Strait from Asia down into the Americas. Maybe they went up from South America through the Bering Strait into the Asiatic areas. And maybe another group of very few people survived and went into Europe or into Africa. But what I recognized was, in the record, there was a lot of lost civilizations and a lot of different cultures. And a lot of people don't understand that culture denotes this manifestation of the manner in which, groups think and behave and act. And civilization is like this process of human development, organization, religion, art, dance and literature and customs and morals that would all, be an example of development. It's two separate different units, and both show lost civilizations, lost people, lost either seafaring or other technology that's been lost. So I'm trying to get that out there into the mainstream and bring a little bit of my expertise in what I see, my ability to somewhat understand Maya, and the fact that Maya is more than likely ancient Olmec, which is possibly ancient Naga, which is known as an Adamic language. And then in the artifacts, there's anomalies, and in the structures and the writing that shows that different catastrophes took place that wiped out civilizations, or that made us lose this vast knowledge of who we are, where we come from, or maybe who created us or assisted in creating us, or hybridizing who we are now as Homo sapiens sapien. And in my presentations, I show that the record shows 4 different types of catastrophes that took effect that I'm able to show. Obviously, there could be many more. And this one lecture that I currently have goes over 2 of those, specifically, which was a solar outburst and possibly Venus, the planet, intervening with Earth. But the other 2 would be in a later, lecture, because it's just too much to discuss in one thing. And that would be that there was a process in the center of our planet that caused almost like a nuclear type explosion that caused major devastation, and it shows in our historical data. that this is what took place. And it's just people are not willing or failing to recognize that there's alternative possibilities to our history of, what was happening.
Dr. Lessin.
That's very refreshing. I came to very much the same conclusions. And when I studied the ancient Sumerian stuff with Zechariah's translations and others, what they said very clearly is that Ningishita, or Thoth, or as he's known in the New World as Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, came over first to Lake Titicaca area to Tiwanaku to help his cousin Adad and his uncle Ninurta. They were building the spaceport with the takeoff at Nazca to take the gold back to Nibiru. And then Thoth later came back after he lost control of Egypt, and he built Stonehenge with Enki, and he came then next to Teotihuacan. He found gigantic gold, and he began bringing over his technicians, which were the West African people, and he'd already had South American Indians. They were really just the descendants of Cain from east of Eden, where they had migrated. So anyway, when the Maya were there, ruled by the technician class, which was the Olmecs, and then there's these bearded Sumerians you can see on their pottery and stuff that are the guys in charge in Ningishita's particular coterie. And the story goes that he educated the most brilliant children, 12 of them, to take care of the Mayan society when he left in 311 CE or so, and he said he'd be back with his dad, with Enki and a bunch of other Anunnaki to clean up the mess when it was time for the ages to change. And so there's that story. And then there's, as far as one catastrophe for sure, when after the Noah's flood 13,000 years ago, a leader called Mayalap took people on balsa boats just in the Thor Heyerdahl route and landed in Bolivia in Paracas Bay. And when he needed directions, he would consult with a green stone on board, which is the way they talk about a computer. And so he knew exactly where he was going. They marched. He brought the people ultimately up to the Lake Titicaca area. And after the flood, Ningishita and Thoth went back and gathered the descendants of the Cains who had sheltered by Lake Titicaca up in the mountains, and he brought them together and recreated. They started rebuilding from that. So anyway, then the other Anunnaki got really into the act, and Nanar had Colombia had wonderful civilizations going, and so forth. And then what happened is the Indians came down. Probably they were influenced by Marduk, but they were coming down. And they started beating back the Olmecs, and they beat them out of El Salvador and Honduras, and down across. They made their last stand at Chimu, and that was it. They were driven out, and you see the bodies of and drawn in art too, the bodies of white men with beards, of black people, and of their Indian people that were with them. Anyway, so that's an alternative, and that's certainly one of the big things. And the other thing is that underneath what we thought was just jungle and just 60 feet of earth is there's millions of people that live there, way more than we ever thought. And this LiDAR is showing this vast, the same thing like we're finding in Cambodia too. Just dig a little deeper and you start getting lots of stuff.
Okay, back to you.
Yeah,
Are you still there, James?
Yeah, I am. I'm still here. It's interesting. Part of my lecture when I was in Teotihuacan was the fact that there are mica chambers located far away. And I kind of go into that as to what those possibilities were. I think that was something Dr. Lessin made somewhat of a reference to. And when I was there last, they had been excavating all these tunnels underground that they didn't even know about until a few years ago, and they were very hush-hush because I kept trying to ask questions, and security kept having to get involved, which I don't understand it. But anyway, but in the record, there are certain petroglyphs or pictographs that are found throughout the world that are identical. And what they are showing is massive catastrophes that took place. And the ancient people at the time, as they looked up in the sky, saw this. And those that survived the catastrophe, obviously they had to do it underground. And either those few that survived put it into this written form on rock, or it was passed down from generation to generation through oral stories, and eventually put into a form of writing once writing and language was brought back onto the planet. In order to tell of what happened. And based upon what it shows, some of these catastrophes look like they could have occurred together, or they could take place over and over again based upon maybe location of where our solar system is traveling through the galaxy. And it could be on a certain time frame, say maybe 36, 37, 3,800 years or 5,000 years that it takes place again. And these civilizations like the Maya, they were fascinated by certain things, Venus being one of them. And they wanted to log all this information for future generations. And it's interesting because when you look at their stories and the codices that are left and remaining, they show timelines based upon, 52 years or 104 years or, other longer time frames of time, based upon, their calendar time of like a Baktun, things of that nature. And if nothing happened on that day, the Mayas celebrated because they were alive. And they even gave human offerings to be thankful for civilization not being destroyed again as it had been earlier. So I want to present that information, present these specific petroglyphs, and then present evidence in text or on the rock art, or things that have happened recently out in space that were captured. And I can show that and show that it looks to be the same thing that was on the rock art or in the rock art. And what's really neat is...
Do you see anything like Farrell's idea that there was this cosmic war, and that some of the catastrophes on Earth was caused by an interplanetary war? Is there any evidence that you saw of anything like that?
I didn't come across anything like that, but that's something I wasn't looking for. So if it didn't present itself, in specific rock art or something, it wasn't something I was looking for. Like I said, there's a possibility of multiple types of catastrophes that took place. And there's 4 that I am able to provide evidence for, and show that this is a very possible that these catastrophes took place and caused massive devastation not only of the planet, but of, humans on the planet. I mean, to a point where we almost became extinct like a lot of other species.
Yeah. And people like the Zuni say, and the Hopi, the ant people, the Greys came and took us down under the earth, and Chaco Canyon and other places and kept us there for a few hundred years. Then they took us up by Sedona, and they made a place that was safe for us, 100 miles or so, with plenty of game, and made sure we were okay. And our job was to gather all the other survivors. And they took us to where we live now in the Four Corners. And you talk to any of the native people that survived, they'll tell you stories like that. In a revisionist anthropology, we start with these guys are telling us the literal truth that, in their own language. And so I just love your idea. That's so simple and so core. We have a technology where we can do recombinant genetic experiments. We can travel faster than light. Our clandestine military has all kinds of amazing time travel devices and stuff, and now we know it. And so now all this stuff from before can be looked at with a level of knowledge we have now, knowing that we too are ignorant, but we're learning quick.
Absolutely, and you had gone over it a little bit. I had just recently come back from Chihuahuacan in Guerrero, Mexico, and this is a entire massive city, probably 8 square miles. And Dr. Lessin, you remember that just 25 years ago they said there was no civilizations on the west coast of Mexico. None of that existed. And here they found an entire city that's probably 8 square miles. They've only uncovered 1% of it. And guess what they have? There's a pyramid that is completely covered in a clay that has survived for, they say 3500 BCE. I say it's a lot older. And this clay is in perfect condition except for where the archaeologists used dynamite to get the dirt off of it, damaged it slightly. But they have tried to recreate this clay, and they can't do it. And as you and I know, the clay that we use to cover something, it may only last 6 or 7 years. And here we have something since 3500 BC that's in perfect condition. How is it possible that this technology is more advanced than what we have now? And because that technology was available, where did it come from? And just people need to realize if that was available, then obviously there's a lot of other lost information that we just have forgotten or lost due to, text being destroyed in fires or by certain people through history. Or just this inability to want to believe that civilizations were here on the earth that were far more advanced than what we have today. Yep. It's ethnocentric. It's an ethnocentric view. It's very backwards.
The west coast of North America was the mountainous part was part of a continent of Lemuria or Mu that is now submerged. But that's we in Hawaii are on the mountains of Mu, and so I'm not at all surprised that there's pyramids. There's a huge structure right off of Malibu, California. There's tunnels deep connecting these things. These pyramids are way, way, way more than you might think they are. They're not just structures; they have functions. And I'll bet you. I wonder if anyone's gone in this thing yet.
They haven't gone in yet. The archaeologist is afraid to open up the staircase because he knows looting will take place and there's zero security. But it's interesting. It's really interesting that you just said that because they took us on the very top of the pyramid, and there is a square. It's probably about 10 by 10. And what they told us was the ancient people that lived there had built 4 other pyramids or structures on hills or mountains out about 30 or 40 miles away. And all these other structures line up, and guess where they meet? When you draw these ley lines, they intersect right at this square. And then a 5th line is supposed to come right up through there, and there's supposed to be this energy that forms or takes place there. And what I found interesting was when we talked to the locals, they showed us a ton of cell phone photos of what I could only say was maybe, UFOs. And one of them was really interesting because it looked like these super dark purple curtains coming straight up out of the ground around this square. It's just this dark, deep purple for some reason. And there's this object flying around above it. And I took that photo on his cell phone, and I was blowing it up and messing with it. And this is from a guy that lives there, and he says this is just normal activity that takes place on top of this pyramid. And I thought it's interesting, if this is one of only 2 or 3 structures that have been excavated, what the hell else is underneath their feet? And, 25 years ago they said, no, there's nothing there, nobody ever came here. And yet now there's proof that even the Maya from 675 miles away were there in Chihuahuacan, and there's proof in artifacts. And it's mind blowing that I was, taught to believe and constantly told and still told, no, that, they didn't have the wheel. They only traveled 50 or 60 kilometers. Well, if you look at clay vases, one in particular that's in Mexico City at the Anthropology Museum, it's clear as day that there's somebody flying around on what looks like some type of air motorcycle or air cycle, and that there was technology that just was in use that had magnetic properties that could lift semi-magnetic stones, and we all know that everything has some type of magnetic ability, and it's just a fact of rediscovering it, and we're going to. I mean, it's just a matter of time before we dig all this up.
Yeah, well, Dunn talks about how in a pyramid structure, if you pump water on the bottom and then you add a hydrogen explosion by adding HCl and you make an explosion of hydrogen and send it out, that's how the lights of Luxor worked. It generates electricity picked up by granite columns, and it's electricity. And so just before dawn is what happens on the surface when the ley lines reverse their direction, and it's generating electricity. And craft would fly over the Great Pyramid, and they charge their batteries. That's what we get from Sitchin anyway.
Well, from the photos that I saw, that it might be exactly what's taking place. I mean, it was very interesting that this square right above the pyramid seemed to attract a lot of paranormal activity.
Wow.
You mentioned the sacrifice. They celebrated and they made who started that sacrifice stuff? Was that a perversion of something like a cargo cult type thing, and it got twisted?
Absolutely.
Either of you.
Absolutely. Religion, unfortunately, when things can't be explained, people look to explanations, and you and I understand that paranormal is the unexplainable, and one way of explaining that is through religion. And when time goes on, certain religions or cults gain strength. People are brought into that religion or faith, being born into it or accepting it. The sacrifice became a way of thanking the God or gods that they were still alive after that day came and nothing happened and they weren't destroyed as they had been in the past. And I think that, just like with petroglyphs, I always tell people what a petroglyph meant or stood for thousands of years ago may not be the same now. It may be artistic at this point or something, but it's the same thing in regards to the way they did that. I apologize, I'm getting feedback right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That happens every show. We almost made it without feedback, but now we're getting it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, honey, your turn.
Von Daniken says that Thoth or Kukulkan took these 12 brilliant children and he educated them to be the priestly caste, and then generation and generation and generation passed, and they started using the sacrifice to get rid of their enemies. And they expanded it, and basically they became a murderous cabal like the one that rules the world right now. And however, before that happened, the Maya, according to our sources, became skyfaring. You look at the sarcophagus of Lord Palenque, at Palenque, of course, this gigantic thing. It shows him inside of his craft, and our reports we get from super soldiers are that the Maya are still spacefaring. They have been rescuing people from the Nazi bases in the solar system and beyond, and they're keeping them in camps. If Earth gets cleared up, they're going to bring them back or find some other place for them to be okay. And they are here. They're here with the Anunnaki, and they're good guys, and they're here to help us. I hope it's true. That's it. Pass.
Okay. So we're talking about the catastrophes. So what do you know about the past ones and the ones to come? Is there a way of predicting based on what you examined in the past?
It's interesting. The Maya people say the Maya calendar and the Aztec calendar, but what people have to realize is the Olmec, and even a group of people before them, let's call them the Proto-Olmec, had the same calendar. As a matter of fact, this calendar probably existed with civilizations that we've lost any knowledge of. And the Maya, they didn't invent it, they borrowed it. And, that can be shown and proven in the archaeological record. But they were specifically keeping track of certain movements, specifically of Venus. And it's interesting to think that when these dates would pass, like I said, and nothing happened, they would celebrate. So obviously, a lot of Native American cultures and Mesoamerican cultures believe we're either in the fourth or fifth world, and those past worlds were destroyed by water, by fire, by man jaguar or monster jaguar, as they put it, and who knows what that was. Maybe it was a different species or a different race that existed, maybe human-like, like giants or something of that nature. But they were afraid of something that took place, and they built cosmological records, astronomical records to track all this movement for a reason. And, people say, oh, well, Venus is there. I don't know what you're talking about. But Venus, it's an interesting topic because you look in Sumerian records, and it's talked about being in different places or traveling in different locations, and it makes you wonder if Venus was elsewhere, not where it is right now, a second rock from the sun, but maybe elsewhere. Maybe it was a rogue comet. Or maybe it interacted with other natural satellites that were around the Earth. Maybe the moon wasn't the only satellite that we had.
It's interesting. Swerdlow, who has had access to a lot of the CIA's records and stuff, it says it puts it like this: when the Lyrans fled the Dracos, some of them settled in a planet called Maldek between Mars and Jupiter, and some of them settled in Mars. And the Maldekans hollowed out this big planetary-sized body, and they blasted Maldek to the Kuiper Belt, and the Maldekans and Martians were went underground in Mars. They were okay, and this thing went past Earth, sucked off the extra water, and came to the position of Venus. The snow melted off, and 7 Dracos domes were made on the surface. From there, they placed our moon, which is hollow, just like Iapetus is in around Saturn. It's a hollow moon that was placed exactly in a position, and they stocked it with the dinosaurs. That was their beef, and then they settled on Lemuria first. And so that's another alternative of how all that came about, how the moon got there, and how Venus is a ship that actually moves from place to place, and it was a warship of the Dracos in this formulation.
Yeah, and then Velikovsky has, and I'm not an expert in Velikovsky, but he said that Venus came in like through one of the passing of Nibiru and all that stuff when the things got changed around, and it, like you said, it wasn't in orbit where it is now. It came through, and then that's where it settled. So there's an ancient story that you can look into. Like I said, I'm not an expert in Velikovsky, but there are other people that have suggested that.
Sure, and you know, it's interesting. Velikovsky had some good points. I think he tried crunching it and fitting it into a timeline that just wasn't possible, but he has several points that have been proven. That look at Venus, how hot it is, and that it actually looks like a comet a lot of the time, and we've confirmed that without it having any type of protection around it like the Earth does, it's susceptible to solar winds and CMEs from the sun. And I think a lot of what Velikovsky had to say was maybe slightly off, and maybe if people were to go back and reevaluate what he said, there may be some true substance to what he was, postulating took place.
So do you think we're going to get Nibiru coming through? What are your conclusions on Planet X?
I'm not too familiar with Nibiru. I know lately they've been saying that something is pulling on the outer planets that just shouldn't be taking place. And obviously for that to happen, this has to be a massive sized object. In regards to the records that I've seen, I haven't been able to translate anything that shows the Native Americans or the Mesoamericans documenting an additional planet. But like I said from the beginning, anything's possible. Who are we to say it's not possible or it doesn't or did not exist? And like I always tell people, the 4 catastrophes I speak about is because I can show it as possible evidence existing in the archaeological record, but I am positive that a lot of other things took place as well, and that there have been many catastrophes that have wiped out many species from this planet. And I'm pretty familiar with allele theory and genomes and genomic techniques through the biology that I took, and it's hard not to believe that our genes weren't altered in some way, shape, or form, and that's some hybridization of past Australopithecus or hominids of some some type weren't altered to create current Homo sapiens sapiens.
So what do you think is going on with the alien hybridization program, the modern one? That did you touch on that in your book? Are you going an alien?
No, I thought for the elementary kids that might be too deep, and I wasn't quite sure how to explain that to that age. I kept the first book very simple. I wanted to really introduce them to the vocabulary and the terminology that's used, but at their grade level. But in the next book, I obviously want to push it a little further, maybe kind of show that there's obviously a possibility that the paranormal and UFOs and interdimensions coexist together, or maybe one and the same.
So, from your perspective, what do you conclude is happening with the extraterrestrials in terms of the modern hybridization program? We have the ancient one, which Sitchin and other researchers talked about. Oh, we got horrible feedback. I hate when we have that.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. There's an echo.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think is, from your perspective, what do you think about the modern hybridization program compared to the ancient hybridization program? What does your research tell you? Sasha, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. I can hear you just perfectly, Janet.
Yeah, I can hear you now too.
Ahead.
You know what? I'm not too familiar with anything current. What I know or can see is a lot in ancient Sumerian clay tablets. As a matter of fact, in my lecture, I always like to open up with certain pictures showing, the 4 clay jars, and that more than likely these clay jars were the different races, the different DNA, the minor DNA differences that separate current man, and kind of touch upon the fact that there could very well have been a fact that there was a learning curve, that they may have initially taken Australopithecus and tried to create something that didn't work so well. And you see these human-like forms in ancient Egypt or in Sumeria, and different types of animals. Examples like a unicorn or a 2-headed dog. They very well could have existed. And either they died out by a catastrophe, or it was something that was created and not wanted, and they moved on, and then again made another attempt, maybe with a Homo erectus or a different group of human-like, maybe, and then until they felt comfortable with what they created, which was who we are now. And who's not to say it hasn't stopped or is being altered by governments or other entities that we're not aware of.
We're down to our
it's
minutes. What would you like to tell our listeners?
Yeah, you got to tell how people can get hold of you, where your appearances are going to be, where they can buy your stuff. Give yourself an ad now.
Sure. You can find me at amazon.com/author/James Keenan. All my books are located on that page, or you can go to Amazon or to Barnes & Noble, or Barnes & Noble online, and they're all available. I will be giving a lecture on ancient anomalies pointing towards past worldwide catastrophic events this Saturday at Phoenix MUFON. It's from 12 to 3 at the museum at Papago Park. And I also will be soon finishing that second book to the UFO and an Alien, and covering additional points, like I said, bringing in a little bit of the paranormal knowledge as well.
Excellent. And what are some of your other books? I didn't get all the names of all your books. You said you wrote 5 books?
Yes. So it's Dark Shadows and Catastrophe, which is the original, where I said probably about 40% of it really did take place. I just created a character. And a lot of my belief system in ancient civilizations and cultures I've injected into it. Then it's the date, which is 10/22/2036, a continuation of Dark Shadows and Catastrophe. And that hints kind of like what you had asked about, where it's a continuing catastrophe that happens more than once on a timeline, and kind of prepare humanity for that. And I have shoplifting in a paranormal, so which again has some truth to it.
From listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
And The UFO and an Alien is my first children's book.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
I pulled that. It wasn't. I didn't want to
on the go. Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Check. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
And I'm your host, Jennifer Lessin, and Sasha.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter